Welcome, my friends. This is Maniacal Incorporated, returning to a hobby, a passion that is near and dear to my heart, ranting incoherently about Insular Christianity and its representation in Crusader Kings 3. A few weeks before CK3 came out, I made a video looking at some screenshots that we had from the devs to get an idea of what Insular Christianity might look like when the game was released. So I discussed some things that I'd like to see and some things that I hoped wouldn't make it into the game, such as the Order of St. Patrick. When the game came out and I got a chance to play it, I made some updated opinions and suggestions, and I posted those over on the Paradox forums. There's a handy little TLDR at the bottom of the post, so I linked to both of those below in the description. But there were a couple of things that I didn't really want to make comments on, most notably the tenets of Insular Christianity, because I didn't know how these affected a larger or longer playthrough, or what kind of effects these would have on the game over an extended period of time. And to get an idea of that, I started a playthrough in 867 in Athlone, and that was my 50-part playthrough, which I finished recently. Do check it out if you haven't done so already. It was actually great fun, and that gave me a much more detailed idea of how all the aspects of Insular Christianity and the way Ireland is represented in the game, how these all fitted together, what parts benefited the game, which parts maybe took from the game, which parts were we could improve and make them more historically representative, and what parts just kind of maybe had to stay there for one reason or another. So I intended making another video after finishing that playthrough, discussing what my kind of final opinions as of patch 1.2.2, what my kind of final opinions were, and what kind of final suggestions that I'd like to make. Now, thankfully, these suggestions don't need to be theoretical. I don't need to just kind of sit here and discuss them and imagine a world in which they were in place, because using my original video and using my Paradox post, a modder by the name of Noir, he goes by a number of names, but I'm going to call him Noir, has made two mods. Well, he's made a lot of mods. He's made a standalone Insular Christianity mod, an improved Insular Christianity mod. It's on One Proud Bavarian's list of essential mods for the game. So he made this mod where he implemented a lot of the suggestions that I made in my video and the post. And he also made a number of mods for other religions, so he grouped all of these together, along with some changes to localization, some new, we can just maybe see them here, some new areas created. Lots of new counties created here in Ireland, which we'll be addressing as well. But localization changes, lots of changes to other parts of the map, lots of changes to other parts of the world as well. And he collected all these together in his TIP Volume 2 mod, Total Improvement mod, Volume 2. Volume 1 is for CK2. So there'll be links to those in the description. I'm playing in the TIP Volume 2 mod. And what I might do at some point in time, if anyone is interested, I was holding off on starting another playthrough until the Pope has been patched in as the head of Insular Christianity. But maybe I might start another 867 playthrough in Ireland. Now that we have all of these new regions, and now that we have a modded version of Insular Christianity. So if anybody has any suggestions for who they'd like to see me start as, I was thinking maybe up into your Connell, take Ulster, Alloch and Ulla, and then push into this region, try and take back Iona, so maybe actually push in this direction, or maybe start down in Leinster and push for Wales, instead of just a reconquer the island run, or conquer the island run. So if anyone has any suggestions for that, please do put them below, and it's something I might think about doing. Like I said, below in the description there are links to all of the mods, my previous video, my post, which I totally forgotten about, my Paradox forum post, and also my Twitch channel. I've been playing this mod on Twitch over the last while, getting an idea of what it looks like. So what my kind of first impressions were. You turn on the game, you see the mod, what it looks like. There's been a lot of changes over the last while. When I started playing the mod, I was also complaining about the sizes of the baronies. So these are the baronies that that Paradox created. The barony of Sligo is larger than the modern day county of Sligo. This is ridiculous. Some of these baronies are massive, and they are larger than entire counties in England. So I was complaining about that. Pete Noir's solution was to split them out into 2 barony counties. So there's been a lot of changes over the last while as I've been making comments on my Twitch channel. But do check that out as well, twitch.com/maniacal inc. You'll find the link below in the description. But what I'm going to do today is I'm going to look through Insular Christianity as it is represented in this mod, in the Tip Volume 2 mod. See which suggestions were implemented that have contributed positively to the game, which may not have contributed positively to the game, and look to see, basically, were my suggestions any good? So here is the new layout for Insular Christianity. Like I said, the island has been split out into a massive number of counties. I'm not going to be addressing that in this video. I might address it in a playthrough, who all the rulers are and who all the various people that have been created are, and I will be addressing some of the problems that this creates, or not some of the problems, but some of the considerations that we might need to make. Paradox is very keen to push an idea of a kind of a fractal island, all split up, and that there was no internal unity whatsoever, which would not be true. So we might address that either in this video at a later point in time. I'm going to focus predominantly on the religion. We're going to start with the religion. And more than likely, the first thing that actually stands out, if you've played any length of time in Ireland before, or with Insular Christianity, is the new symbol. So in my video, I suggested that the brown nondescript mess in the top left-hand corner be replaced with something like the Cross of Cong, an artifact that was made by commissioned by the King of Connacht, Turlough O'Cruhur, in the early 1100s. And because I thought, with this, whatever the symbol they were using beforehand, it didn't say anything about the religion. It was just this bland cross. And somebody in the comments to that video said, how about the Cross of Neath? I'd seen it before, but I didn't actually know its name. The Cross of Neath is a Welsh artifact, and it looks a lot like your typical Celtic cross. You think Celtic cross, you're generally thinking the Cross of Neath, whether you know it or not. And I thought that was a brilliant idea. There is a tendency, and we're going to see it in this video, and we've seen it in my previous videos, there is a tendency to treat Insular Christianity as though it applies only to Ireland. Of course, the reality is that Insular Christianity is not real.
It's totally made up.
It is a term used by modern historians to describe unique traditions in the practice of Catholicism in Ireland, but also in parts of Scotland, Wales, Cornwall, and Northern England, and bits of the rest of England as well at various different points in time. So the idea of just having Insular Christianity represent Irish traits and characteristics, I think by having the Cross of Neath, that would contribute a lot to widening the representation of this faith. Pete Noir worked off of my video predominantly, and so he went with the Cross of Cong, like I said, an artifact from the early 1100s. I thought this was going to be purely a superficial change, would contribute absolutely nothing to the game. In my playthrough, my vanilla CK3 playthrough, When I would go down through my court list, maybe we might be able to see it now, I found it very difficult to differentiate between the Catholic cross and the Insular Christian cross. So I found it very difficult, as I was going down through this list, to actually spot people who were not following Insular Christianity and demand their conversions. In my playthroughs on Twitch, where I've been playing just briefly getting an idea of what the game is like, I have found it, as you can see, it is a lot easier to tell the difference between who is and who isn't following Insular Christianity. Obviously, it doesn't make a difference when this is the symbol, but when the Catholic and the Insular Christian symbols were so similar, it was very difficult to tell the difference. So this actually has been a surprising improvement to the game that I didn't actually expect would improve the game, and I would recommend that the emblem or the symbol for Insular Christianity be changed even in the base game. From there, we will move on to the big guns, the Tenets. The tenets of Insular Christianity in vanilla CK3 are vows of poverty, monasticism, and pastoral isolation. And you might remember that I had big problems with pastoral isolation and what exactly it was saying about Insular Christianity. Pastoral isolation is the only tenet that affects a county's development growth. It is a minus 10% monthly penalty to dev growth. And I thought that was maybe a bit steep for the people who invented spaces between words. You're welcome. I pointed out that maybe a dev penalty could be justified because the Irish did not use, at this point in time, were not using coins. The first people on the island to mint coins were the Vikings. It didn't really catch on. The Irish continued using cattle until the arrival of the Normans in the mid-1100s, and as English rule in Ireland collapsed in the centuries, the decades leading up to the reconquest, even the Old English, the Norman families, began using cattle again as the kind of the main unit of value and exchange. So, okay, sure, some type of a death penalty might be justified. Then again, on the other hand, I spoke about how the Irish had this absolutely gargantuan output of manuscripts, all of which were written on vellum, expensive calfskin, and some historians have estimated that up to 50% of the calves born annually on the island were slaughtered for the production of vellum, which would indicate the existence of a massive industry dedicated to raising cattle, slaughtering cattle, producing vellum, and then producing the illuminated manuscripts for which the Irish are famous. And of course, many of the innovations, we'll say, in punctuation that were developed in Ireland, these spread to other insular monasteries and religious institutions in Britain. So they would have spread from Ireland to northern England and to Wales, and from here then they would have spread to the continent. So that was my arguments for and against this death penalty. I didn't want to say anything definitive about it because I wasn't too sure how it impacted the game, and a number of people who commented on that first video said that no death penalty could overcome the massive bonus from being a Christian faith, the only Christian faith, with polygamy. And this was before the game had came out. People argued that the fact that Insular Christianity was polygamous was going to overcome any death penalty. I wasn't so sure about that. When I played the game, in my 50-part playthrough, the first thing I noticed was that the dev penalty, the minus 10% dev penalty, absolutely crippled county development. It ground to a halt. The only thing to offset the minus penalty was, ironically enough, I think it was the coinage, or was it the currency innovation. So in tribal Ireland, 867 start Ireland is tribal, and it was either, let's see what the innovation is that you start off with in the tribal era, currency. So this gives you a 10% development growth bonus, and that was the only thing that countered the minus 10% penalty from pastoral isolation. So basically, no county development growth. That's the first thing that I noticed. The other thing, of course, is that a lot of the baronies in Ireland are wetland. Now, realistically, they should be forests. Ireland was actually heavily forested at this point in time. Paradox has seen fit to make most of the country a bog. And if your county capital is a bog, that's another minus 25% penalty. That's an interesting side effect of all of the new counties. So in the base game, Connacht would have been a single county with a minus 25% penalty for having a bog as its capital. Now it's 2 counties with minus 25% penalties. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out. So pastoral isolation ground development to a halt on the island. That's the first thing I noticed. Second thing I noticed was I didn't care. It didn't make an ounce of a difference. The ability to raid more than made up for any negative impact that pastoral isolation had on taxation income. So your dev figure, let's see if we can actually bring one up. We mightn't be able to. There we go. Oh my god, development of 2. Holy hell, I didn't know the numbers could go that low. So yeah, these places, whoa. These places are bad. So, and there you can see county capital, Limnock, is wetlands, minus 25%. So even now that we've gotten rid of pastoral isolation in this game, there's still 0 development growth. Oh no, it's a plus 0.1, so it doesn't make a difference. But you can see that this figure, it affects taxation income, it affects levy size, where's that counter levy size, and it also affects the rate at which new innovations are developed. There's a 5% chance to gain 0.34 progress each month, base progress, average development of Irish counties. So the average development of your counties. Rating more than made up for any hit to taxation. And in general, it was so risk-free that it was over 40 episodes before I discovered that once a raiding army begins a raid, they cannot move away from that spot until the raid finishes. I actually thought it was a bug, but Socks Way Up, who commented on the video, he also makes his own videos on city skylines, so if you're interested in that, go and check out his channel. Socks Way Up pointed out that no, actually, once a raid begins, you can't move until the raid ends. I did not discover that until about 45 episodes in, when we started raiding Lothringa. We somehow inherited a county. We somehow inherited this county. We were able to use it as a springboard to raid Lothringa. So, yeah, the ability to raid totally offsets any penalties to taxation that you're going to suffer because of the dev penalty. For those people who pointed out that polygamy was OP, they were absolutely correct. I hit the renown cap for having 100 living members of the family. I hit that very early. We were able to establish tremendously important alliances before the nerf came in. That meant that religions that don't have, or faiths that don't have polygamy, will not allow their daughters, will say, to become secondary wives. So they will accept a primary wife position, but they will not accept secondary wife positions. It didn't make a difference. At that point in time, you can start marrying to try and keep traits in the family. You can start marrying purely just to have more children that you can marry out for even more alliances. 4 episodes into the playthrough, there is a massive invasion, and there is just a montage of me marrying off about 10 kids to secure alliances to help defend against the invasion. So absolutely, polygamy is just so powerful in this game. Largely historically accurate. The Irish would have had a primary wife, a secondary wife, and then maybe a concubine. The Irish justify this on the grounds that people in the Old Testament had multiple wives, so why can't we? and marriage was actually handled under secular law. So it was handled as part of what would be today called Brehon law. It wasn't handled by the church. So the church said, because the Irish were Catholic, you can only have one wife. But the Irish were like, but the Bible, the Old Testament. My worry is that the minus 10% penalty was an attempt maybe to offset the bonuses of polygamy. My worry would be that basically, in the absence of that minus 10% penalty, Insular Christianity might become OP, which would be something that would be just as bad as having it poorly represented. A technologically superior Ireland that is able to develop laser beams and invade England early in the game. That's just as historically inaccurate as this really backward, inward-looking Ireland cut off from the rest of the world. My main problem with pastoral isolation was the flavor text. That was my big problem. It was never the minus 10. Well, I won't say it was never the minus 10% death penalty. I was prepared to live with that, but it was the flavor text that was my big problem. It's pretty much seared into my mind at this stage. I remember it off by heart. All we want is to be left alone in our insular home. But why does it always feel like we're in the Schengen zone? Wait, no, that doesn't sound right. It was something about being inward and isolated and not wanting... the way we practice our faith is the interest of nobody else, just as their practices are not of interest to us. Now, the problem with pastoral isolation, I only found this out recently, is that it is also a tenet of the Bosnian church. And I'm not too sure how well that reflects the faith as practiced in Bosnia, or in the Bosnian region, but as I pointed out, it's completely ahistorical. It's a completely ahistorical description when applied to Ireland and the parts of Britain that would have followed insular traditions, what would be today described as insular traditions. In my original video, I discussed missionaries like Columbanus, who is associated with monasteries from Luxol all the ways down to Bobbio in Italy, where he's buried. In my playthrough, one of the episodes is called In the Footsteps of Columbanus, where we were called in to help West Francia. I think it was to conquer the Kingdom of Italy, so we were wandering around northern Italy in regions where Irish missionaries would have visited previously. In my original video and in the Paradox forum post, and again in the playthrough, I discussed the likes of Sedelius Scotius and John Scotius, important Irish missionaries who travelled to Europe, translated important works from Greek into Latin, and contributed to the development of modern Catholic doctrine. I discussed how missionaries built abbeys and monasteries from northwestern Spain all the ways to Kiev. The part about insular Christianity not wanting to be, not caring about how the faith is practiced in Rome, and the part about how Rome should have no interest in how it's practiced here, that's completely wrong. Modern confession, private confession, as it is practiced in the Catholic Church today, comes from the insular tradition. At this point in time, or maybe a bit earlier than the 800s, the practice in Catholicism would have been public confessions. Insular Christians, or insular Christianity, calling them insular Christians isn't great, because again, like I said, there's no such thing as the insular church or insular Christians, but Catholicism is practiced in the British and Irish Isles quite often would have had private confession. And this is an idea that actually was spread to the mother church in Rome. Ideas also came in the opposite direction. In the up until the late 600s, the island of Ireland would have had its own vastly superior method for the calculation of the date of Easter, which was one of the things that Rome was particularly opposed to. In the late 600s, the southern half of the island, so basically Le Moga, so down around this region, would have adopted the Roman method for the dating of Easter, and then into the early 700s, the northern half of the island, Lequien, would have adopted the Roman method for the dating of Easter. So ideas went in both directions. My main problem with pastoral isolation always has been the flavor text. I don't know how well it fits in with the Bosnian church, but at the end of the day, I still don't have, as I didn't in my original video and as I didn't in the Paradox forum post, I don't have a definitive reason for getting rid of it. Reword the flavor text. That's all that I have ever said. Basically, my playthrough was, it could be subtitled to a degree, Dr. Ruokon II, or How I Learned to Stop Ranting and Tolerate Pastoral Isolation. Because the dev penalty, and I did forget to mention this, the tactical use of your steward to develop, to increase development in your counties, and or a scholar high king, they totally offset the penalties from pastoral isolation. So this was definitely something that I thought was going to be a massive hindrance. When I saw it first of all, when I played the game first of all, I thought it was going to be a massive hindrance, and in reality it was a speed bump. That's pretty much what it was. I don't think we were all that far off reaching all the technologies needed or all the innovations needed to progress to the feudal era. So I don't think it had as negative an impact on the game as I thought it originally would have. So yeah, I mean, maybe there is a case for keeping pastoral isolation. They're just rewording the flavor text. Now, Noir, based on my arguments, decided to replace it with, he replaced Vows of Poverty and he replaced pastoral isolation. I don't think either of the two that have been introduced do anything massive. Conversion speeds, I know people have had problems with that because it's kind of like converting a Catholic county from Catholicism to Catholicism. That's really what you're talking about when you talk about the spread of insular Christianity. But again, it could be the Catholic Church is under pressure and you're seeing the spread of insular ideas like private confession, like penitentials, like capital letters at the starts of sentences. You're seeing ideas like that spread, maybe as the Roman Church is coming under pressure. So communal identity and syncretic folk traditions, I don't think they add anything. I also didn't call for vows of poverty to be removed. I did point out that they were maybe a bit ahistorical in that land and assets would have been viewed as belonging to a kin group, and indeed members of the kin group could actually cancel contracts made by other members of the kin group if they negatively impacted things like inheritance. So if somebody was going to give away all their land to the church, members of the kin group could override that contract because it negatively impacted the members of the family and their future inheritance rights. Early Irish or early missionaries to Ireland, so the likes of Patrick, would have been viewed with suspicion because they were encouraging people to give away their property to the church, and this was something that was kind of frowned upon by the wider community. However, in my game, I made constant use of vows of poverty to increase piety whenever it was needed, and like I said, I was able to offset it by just raiding places. So at the moment, the tenets of vanilla insular Christianity could be kept in place. However, with the changes that have been made in the TIP Volume 2 mod to the Island of Ireland, I don't think they can be kept in place in this mod. Another way of handling the dev penalty as it impacts innovations is to control the spread of Irish culture, because like we saw, your modifier comes from the amount of counties, the number of counties that are under, in this case, Irish culture. By keeping those number of counties low and by using your steward to increase development in them, you can bring the average up much faster. Here now we have a metric ton of counties. I actually have no idea how many we have. So Desmond has been split out into two. A couple of counties have been created around here. A lot of counties. Ulla has been split into two. Alach has been split into two. So we now have a lot of counties, and if we reintroduce that dev penalty, it might have a bigger effect now that there's more counties than when it has less counties. I think Paradox is going for kind of keeping Ireland with large counties. It's easy to conquer. It's baby's first kingdom. And then once you've kind of gotten the hang of the game here in Ireland, you move on to somewhere proper, somewhere real, somewhere that actually exists. So definitely all the new counties make Ireland a much more interesting place to play. In my playthrough, I found that it was very hard. You'd form one or two alliances with people on the island of Ireland. If one or two other places were conquered, you were now in a lot of trouble. You really had nowhere to expand. And if the Vikings came in and took even a single county, it really put you on the ropes. You had to act fast and go to war immediately. As soon as even before you unpause the game, you had to go to war. Now it adds a much more interesting dynamic. The Vikings can take a couple of places. There's still room to expand, and you can see other places. So like in my Twitch stream, I started here in the 1060s, start in Ir Connacht, and I was able to just slowly, at my ease, put together the rest of Connacht. I wasn't really worried about what everyone else was doing. Whereas with larger counties, you really, really do have to be worried about what everyone else is doing. But while it's something that I complain about, the reduced numbers of counties on the island of Ireland actually acts as another mitigating factor against that minus 10% penalty. If we did have to make changes to Insular Christianity on the tenets, what would they be? Like I said, I wouldn't argue about bringing back pastoral isolation, and one of the reasons for that, and maybe we have to do it here, if we can find pastoral isolation, always considers other Christian faiths to be righteous. So because of its removal, Insular Christians, Catholics, now consider other Catholics to be astray. So again, Insular Christians at this point in time don't exist. They're not real. They would have considered themselves Catholic. The Pope was the head of the church. There are numerous documents in Ireland relating, if there is a theological debate, you go to such and such a person, then such and such a person is above them, and then the Pope is above them. They would have viewed themselves as Catholic. They wouldn't have called themselves Insular Christian. So now we have this ahistorical scenario where in the game, Catholics are astray. So I would, yeah, sure, keep pastoral isolation there. If we were to remove communal identity, mendicant preachers is interesting. County conversion speed, again, no. But you get an additional bonus upon a successful pilgrimage, I think, to recruiting a holy order, or to paying for a holy order. I thought that's what it was. Characters of this faith gain an additional bonus upon the successful completion of a pilgrimage. But like I said, I've already gone over it, Irish missionaries travelled throughout Europe. Established monasteries, Spain, France, Central Europe especially. Rulers wouldn't have taken pilgrimages, really. Irish rulers wouldn't have been in a position to take all that many pilgrimages. But Irish missionaries would have gone to the continent, would have established missionaries all throughout Scotland, England, Wales. So this would be a good one. Now it is slightly contradictory to monasticism. Our missionaries travel far and wide, isolating ourselves in remote monasteries. So, but that again is actually reflective of the time. Irish monks and missionaries would try to leave their kin groups and leave regions where they had protection under the law and go to areas outside of their own kin groups or outside even of the country to live difficult lives, to live these lives in the name of God. Sometimes that meant going to Iona, which I think is around there. Sometimes it meant going to the continent, and sometimes it meant going to a tiny island, roughly there, where my cursor is. Skellig Vihil, I pointed this out on the last episode. It's where Star Wars was made, a film about Irish space wizards. So, back to Great Faith, and yeah, that's my suggestions for the tenets. Most of this video has been a discussion on tenets. I'm going to be able to get through everything else really, really quickly. I didn't want this to turn into another hour-long rant. But yeah, I would basically put back, or in the base game, keep pastoral isolation and change communal identity either to mendicant preachers. The other one, possibly legalism. And we're going to see now in a couple of minutes how our laws are the result of generations of wisdom and devoutness. I've already argued that the Irish used the Old Testament as an argument to maintain some of their own practices, such as having multiple wives. And when Christianity arrived in Ireland, it found itself up against a very strong and stable and resistant legal tradition. It wouldn't be fair to call it a legal structure. What we today refer to as the Brehon laws. So a lot of insular Christianity, as it was practiced on the island of Ireland, was influenced by, or was kind of in reaction to, the Brehon laws. The virtue and the sin here aren't great. They don't really kind of fit thematically. Mendicant preachers, temperate and gluttonous. So you're kind of losing out on a virtue and a sin if you put mendicant preachers in there with monasticism. But if you have mendicant preachers, monasticism, and insular or pastoral isolation, that is the exact same tenets that are used by the Bosnian Church. Or just leave in vows of poverty, because like I said in my previous video, generous and greedy, very thematically applicable to a culture which put heavy emphasis, both in its mythology and in its law tracts, on the offering and the accepting of hospitality. So possibly vows of poverty, monasticism, and, God help me for saying this, but pastoral isolation would be fitting tenets for insular Christianity. I think I've just spoken for 20 minutes about how we shouldn't change anything about insular Christianity. Wow, that's 20 minutes of my life gone. And yours, if you're still here. Right, we're nearly there. Let's push through the rest of the changes to insular Christianity. I knew tenets was going to be the big one. And as long as I can stop going off on a tangent, we should be able to get through the rest of them soon, shortly. We're not going to be here for another hour, I swear. Marriage doctrines. Divorce always allowed. As I pointed out, marriage was handled under secular law, in which was regarded as a contract, which could be broken by the payment of an honour price. So basically cattle. Which is why I've argued for an insular style of divorce that uses money instead of piety. So at the moment, you can, as long as you have a chunk of piety, you can divorce your wives at will, 24/7, in participating stores nationwide, which is possibly another argument for restoring vows of poverty. So you would take your vow of poverty to generate the prestige or generate the piety that's needed to divorce your wife, in the absence of an insular style of divorce, or maybe a Brehon law style of divorce. In the base game at the moment, it is set to approval. So you need the approval either of your head of faith, or, as with insular Christianity, in the absence of a head of faith, the head of your household. That is not historically accurate. What would have happened in reality is, like I said, divorce at will. And kings would set aside their wives as political conditions on the island changed, and they changed quite dramatically from time to time. So it was not uncommon for rulers to be married almost like 10 times, I think. I think there's a couple of kings that have over 10 wives, or that have children by 10 wives, because again, alliances are constantly being made and being broken. I wonder if that approval required was to put a limitation on the advantages of polygamy. In my playthrough, I have used on Twitch, where I've been playing with the tip mod, I have been using this always allowed divorce continuously. As soon as female characters hit 40 years of age, or as soon as they no longer provide valuable alliances, or as soon as I need to form new alliances, I just clear out and start again. And that is, like I said, very historically accurate, so I'm actually really happy with how this is playing out. I know that there have been changes, I think, to the crime doctrines. It's an odd one, because like I said, crime in Ireland was civil, which meant that there was a victim, there was a perpetrator, and the perpetrator paid compensation to the victim. That included murder. But then there was this legal obligation on the family of the victim to put together a vendetta party. A legal obligation, kind of, to put together a vendetta party and go and seek revenge. It was a weird scenario. So I don't think the crime doctrines need to be changed all that much. I don't see anything here that stands out and that causes any difficulties. Clergy doctrines. I made a couple of suggested changes here. Some of them are brilliant. I will just address this one first of all. Clerical gender either. We do know that in a single case, in Kildare, which I think was the first of the counties that Pete Noir split out, and I think he split it out for this very reason, we do know that in a couple of cases there were female abbots of monasteries. Monastery, singular. The monastery in Kildare. I'm not too sure if there were female abbots in other monasteries. But I said in my Paradox Forum post, I don't see a reason from changing it from male only, but yeah, maybe you could put it as either. Then it was implemented in this mod, and I was like, no, actually I don't like it. A couple of times playing through on Twitch, I've ended up with female bishops, and it doesn't sit well. It doesn't look great. It also doesn't really make much of a difference. Pete Noir put it in there for gameplay reasons. Maybe people would like to play their game with female bishops, and you have that option. It's not totally historically out of context. I'm treating the court position of bishop somewhat like a kind of an abbot. The diocese and the bishoprics weren't really established in Ireland until the early 1100s. It was a very slow process, and quite often abbots also simultaneously held the position of bishops back in the early 8 and 9 and 1000s. But it doesn't really make much of a difference whether you end up sometimes with female bishops, because clerical appointment, this is one of my two favorite changes to the whole thing, my two favorite changes that have been made in this mod. Temporal for life. Rulers can appoint their own realm priest or court chaplain, and they have their seat for life. In my previous videos, previous works and all that, I pointed out Iona, wherever the hell it's gone to, founded by Columkill from Tyrconnell, and for the first 10, I think the first 10 abbots of Iona, all but one of them were members of his branch of the Kinnell Cunnell. What tended to happen was that, like I said, land belonged to a kin group. And what the leaders of these kin groups, especially important lords, would do is they would allow monasteries to be built on their land, or abbeys or whatever, but quite often they would actually they wouldn't necessarily appoint the abbot themselves, but what would happen is that the abbey would go to that family when it needed an abbot. So it would actually take from neighbouring royal families. In one of my Twitch playthroughs, I started in the 1066 start as the Ivrian, and the first time that my bishop died, I appointed a member of my family. And it would have been very common. Brian Boru, his younger brother Marcon, was he the abbot of Terryglass? So he actually served as abbot of a number of different places. So powerful dynasties would have had members of their family appointed to powerful religious positions. And these positions were quite often hereditary. There are actually a number of surnames in Ireland today that indicate that at some point in time, the family held an important church position. Some of them translate as the keeper of church lands, and things like Machanaspig, which would be literally son of the bishop. So there's all these kind of surnames that would indicate that this family at some point in time held hereditary church positions. So that ability, Temporal for Life, is as close as you can get to effectively creating hereditary church positions, or creating maybe a branch of your own family that you are going to appoint every time that you need a bishop. And of course, it also gives you a bit better control of training somebody and preparing them to be your court bishop. Brian Boru was in Loch Lane, Killarney, Inishfallen, the island of Inishfallen in the lakes of Killarney, when his father was killed, and he had to be taken from there to basically an election. His brother Liachna was elected as the successor, but it's likely now Liachna was killed, and then the next brother Mahoon was killed, and then Brian Boru became the head of the Dalgash. But it's likely that if their father hadn't died at that point in time, hadn't been killed, if Brian Boru had been left there, he probably would have become a member of the church instead of it going to Marcon. Marcon would have probably been put in the church as well. There was a ton of them. They would have all gotten church positions. So the ability for you to actually decide which members of your family you want to appoint to church positions, I think that's very historically appropriate, and it does lead to a really enjoyable roleplay aspect. Now, I didn't expect this to be my favourite change, but it is. Clerical function. Recruitment. Members of the clergy. Remember, we just covered that you can appoint these yourself. Members of the clergy can serve as commanders or champions. I suppose the first thing we need to ask is how historically accurate is that. It's something that I've ranted and raved about on numerous occasions. Back into the early 800s, it is indeed. King of Munster, abbot of two abbeys, Phelimid Macrahin. So he was an abbot, he was a king, and he waged war, commanded armies, not against the Vikings, but generally against other Irish monasteries. He was a reforming king, so he was trying to push many of what would be regarded as kind of pro-Roman reforms. He was maybe trying to reform the church away from the representation of insular Christianity that we see here. So he would have attacked Clonmacnoise and things like this. So he was a military abbot. When we come into the 900s, early 900s, Cormac Mac Cuilleann, the king of Munster, was a bishop. He was killed in the Battle of Ballachmoon and was replaced by Flahertuch Machanvannan, who was an abbot. Munster had a tendency in times of political crisis to appoint abbots as their kings in a temporary capacity, a caretaker capacity. And Flahertuch is one such kind of caretaker king of Munster. We know that when the Vikings arrived in Ireland, first of all, and began kind of the very late 7, early 800s, and began attacking abbeys, like I've already pointed out, abbeys often looked to the local ruling families for their abbots. What they started to do was they started to appoint secular abbots, individuals who could basically form alliances for them with the local ruling nobility, who they hoped would come to their aid against the Vikings, or they hired as their abbots individuals with, it'd be unfair maybe to say military skills, but people who they felt and hoped would actually assist in the defense of the abbey. And this was one of the major problems with the wider Catholic Church. They thought this was absolutely mad. The Irish are appointing married men, secular men, totally unsuited for the religious life, and they are appointing them to some of the most important religious positions on the island. And this continued historically after the kind of the Viking menace. I won't say evaporated, but after it kind of died down a bit. So I think it's very fitting, the ability to be able to appoint your bishops as battle bishops. Battle bishop, battle bishop, battle bishop. Where's my battle bishop? Battle bishop. I have had so much fun with these battle bishops, as I've been calling them, in my Twitch playthrough. If you end up in a scenario where you have a Viking invasion and your bishops are being mown down, you wouldn't have had bishops being mown down historically, but the idea that you have had to divert religious resources towards the defense of the island from Viking incursion, very historically accurate, and I think it opens up some great roleplay elements, along with the fact that you can appoint your own court bishop. You can appoint this figure. Now, of course, if you start appointing tacticians with low learning, that's going to impact a number of different things. I think it might even impact development growth slightly as well. I'm not too sure. And again, it's an option for you, a roleplay option for you, a historically apt roleplay option for you, if it becomes necessary. So I've had tremendous fun with this. I've just started up this game now, just to show off everything. But if we come and look at our champions, Rua, our bishop, is our top knight at the moment. In one of my playthroughs, I had a bishop killed in battle. It's actually how, as the Ivrian, I was able to appoint a member of my own family to the position of bishop, and he turned out to be a great battle bishop. It is just brilliant when you have your bishop, and they have the skull here, and you can click on it, and you can go down through the list of people that your bishop has killed in battle. If that scenario occurs, where, like I said, you are appointing high military figures to your position as court bishop, it means something has gone horribly wrong in the kingdom. And with the Viking tendency to invade, that happens quite a lot. So again, if you were to go back over my 50-part playthrough and imagine points in time where I may have gone into a total state of emergency and started appointing high military figures as my bishop, I think it would have added tremendously to that playthrough. And again, what happens... Where are we? Council. When Rua dies, the game will basically generate a successor. That successor could be, under the rules that Pete Noir has in place, that person could be a woman. If, like me, you think, right, yes, historically accurate to a degree, but not really, you can just look at this. Where's it gone to? Appoint a suffragan bishop. Look at this. We mightn't be able to fire him. It does. Oh, it's not revocable. Yeah. So he's been appointed. Once he dies and the next person comes in, you can fire them, and you can fire them once and appoint somebody else. So that's the way it works. So what will happen is he'll die. He'll be replaced by somebody. If I want to and I usually do, I can fire that person and replace them with a member of my family. I would like if it left the position vacant and it popped up here, but can't complain too much. But I have had absolutely tremendous fun with these battle bishops. And again, there's a bit of a penalty to domain taxes, and it helps to lift the levy reinforcement rate a bit. So this would actually be a nice counter, again, to some of the penalties that the decreased dev cost under pastoral isolation gives. But definitely, I was surprised by just how much fun I have had with battle bishops. I'm not in a position to show it off to you, because I was playing on Twitch, and I got a Holy Order formed, and then there was a patch that added a half ton of new counties. It was showing the top half of the island as being Iceland. So I started again, and then there was another patch which introduced Loch Lane, and it was showing Loch Lane as being Iceland. But I got a Holy Order formed in this. One of my biggest gripes was that in the base game, the Holy Order is called the Order of St. Patrick. I've explained why this is totally inappropriate. The Order of St. Patrick is a late 18th century British chivalric order that was created to reward loyal servants of the British Crown in Ireland. It uses the Fitzgerald family's saltire, or saltaire, this X here. So this emblem of Kildare is from the Norman era, and it uses that as the St. Patrick's saltire. This is a creation of the British to represent Ireland, and of course this was incorporated into the Union Jack when Ireland was dragged kicking and screaming into the Act of Union in 1801. So the Holy Order that Paradox put in place, and I said in my original video, I hope they don't put the Order of St. Patrick in, because I knew they were going to. I just knew. It was so inappropriate. It was so historically and culturally insensitive. I knew they were going to do it. And of course the crest is absolutely fascinating, because it's the crest of the Order of St. Patrick, which is the saltire with a shamrock, but they have photoshopped out the 3 crowns that are on the leaves of the shamrock. So they've just left the St. Patrick saltire and the shamrock. And a lot of people with a historical knowledge of Ireland who I've mentioned to, have you seen the Holy Order? It's the Order of St. Patrick. They have felt as sad and as depressed as I did when I saw this for the first time, or when I heard that it was going to be the Order of St. Patrick. I made a number of suggestions, one of which could be the Cúla Dís, as they're sometimes referred to as the Céile Dé. They were a kind of a reformist, secular body of laymen. So these were laymen. They supported reform of the church, and they lived holy lives, but they didn't actually join holy orders. So you could make an argument, it's a bit ahistorical, but you could make an argument that they, they're defending, they're secular individuals who are taken on by the churches to defend from the Vikings. In general, if you're in Ireland and you're making a holy order, it's going to be at the moment for defending against the Vikings, because of course you're not able to join crusades or things like that. The other suggestion that I made is the one that Pete Noir went with, and that was the Fianna Fáile Mead. So I mentioned Fáile Mead Mac Croghan a while ago, reforming, crusading Abbot King of Munster. He was also regarded as a saint in Ireland under certain methodologies, so I just came up with this idea. It's an army that has been dedicated in his memory. It's the Fianna Fáile Mead. You can keep the FF logo of the modern Irish Defence Forces. and just slap a Celtic cross down as the symbol. It doesn't make a difference. So, yeah, I created them in one of my Twitch playthroughs. I found them much more acceptable than the Order of St. Patrick. The Order of St. Patrick is just a big no-no. A big no-no. Or anything that has St. Patrick's saltire on it. The only institutions in modern Ireland that have St. Patrick's saltire on it are royalist institutions. So like the Royal College of Surgeons, the Royal Academy, all of these royalist institutions that are left over from the period before Irish independence. Anything that has been created from the 1920s onwards does not use this symbol. I haven't seen anything. I can't. Actually, there's one institution that used this symbol that was created after the 1920s, and that's the Blue Shirts, a para-fascist organization that fought for, or that went in and fought in the Spanish Civil War for Francisco Franco. So yeah, no, the St. Patrick's saltire is generally a big no-no, and like I said, it is used as a British symbol for rule over the island of Ireland, and the Order of St. Patrick then as something that rewards loyal adherents of the Crown in Ireland is also a big no-no. I do have a number of other suggestions. I've spoke about certain aspects of Irish mythology and Brehon law where blemished rulers could not inherit titles and all this type of stuff. The only other major suggestion that I have is that Paradox should introduce an achievement for anyone who has listened all the ways through my first hour-long rant. If you are one of the 8% of people who watch that video and watch it to the end, I congratulate you. If you have watched all of that and all of this episode, my God, lockdown has been hard on you. Congratulations, well done, thank you. I hope you found it some way interesting. I just basically wanted to rant about Insular Christianity. I should probably do a TLDR. I might do one very quickly. That's brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant. A surprising contribution. These two, they don't do much. And we could pretty much change them back to what they were originally, even though the massive amount of counties might now impact on that. Always allowed, fantastic. Love that. That's great. That's added really historically accurate roleplay and gameplay options. And this, absolutely brilliant. I am delighted with how well the two of these work. Again, the roleplay options that they add, and battle bishops. Battle bishops are just... Paradox's next game should just be called Battle Bishops. I don't know what it'll be about, but I want to play Battle Bishops. Thank you for checking out this video. Like I said, I'm thinking about doing a playthrough in this mod in 867, so I've already done my playthrough in 867 in the vanilla game. So if you have any suggestions for who you would like to see me play as, we have a big heap of places. Loch Lane has been split out, Ossory has been decreased in size, Kildare and Ufolia has been created. Evonia was never this big, but again, it's the ramifications of the massive baronies that Paradox has created. They're created almost in such a way as to prevent modders from creating a some way accurate looking Ireland. We've Ir Connacht, that is actually Meath, and it's still kind of linked to Meath up here. It's weird. Tyrconnell and Tyrone have been split out from Allach. The Dal Naradí and the Dal Fiach have been split out from Ulla. We've Argoilla. So if there is any of them that you would like to see me play as in a future playthrough set in this mod, do leave your suggestions below. Do check out the mod. I've had an enjoyable time playing it. I'm going to be playing it on Twitch for a while. You can check out my links to that below in the description. So check out the standalone Insular Christianity mod, like I said. One Proud Bavarian has it on his list of essential mods. I think it's probably in use when he's playing Crusader Kings 3, but he hasn't done anything in Ireland yet. And then also check out the tip mod. That's the one that actually introduces all of these new counties and new rulers. And it also introduces a number of localization changes. So if I'm right, what's going on up here? I think we should see, yeah, we can see some Gaelic, Scots Gaelic localization in place in Scotland. And we should maybe be able to see, yeah, a lot of Anglo-Saxon localization in England, and the same is done. There's changes added in West Francia, and there's changes added all over the map. So do check out Pete Noir's mods. Links to those are in the description. Thank you all very much for watching this video. I hope you found it interesting. If you have any questions on anything I covered here today, or any questions just on Irish history from this time period in general, I am a devoted and passionate amateur. Well, I will do my best to answer any questions that you might have, or you can follow me on Twitch, and you can shout questions at me there, and I will pause the game and go on hour-long rants and lose tons and tons of viewers. Thank you all very much for joining me on today's episode, and I hope to see you again in future.